The debates are always fiery.
Ko taki timu te waka, ko kai tahu te iwi.
A transition they are currently unprepared for.
The 250,000 licensed farm owners.
86.2% of respondents believe that New Zealand is not doing enough to combat climate change.
But this year, the messages from Youth MPs took a back seat.
Youth MPs are accusing the government of censoring them over changes to their speeches in Parliament.
In many ways, Youth Parliament is exactly like the real thing, often with the young adults outshining the old adults.
The contrast has usually been between the impeccable behaviour of the Youth MPs and the somewhat unruly behaviour of their adult counterparts.
Youth Parliament is described as a unique opportunity for young New Zealanders to learn firsthand about democracy, influence decision-making and have their voices heard. But is that what really happens? Kia ora, I'm Davina Zimmer, and on The Detail today, after 3 decades of Youth Parliament, what exactly has it achieved?
I think the time is right to have a proper review into its function and purpose, including the role of the Youth MPs, how they're selected, and what are reasonable expectations of them. Because I think with a much clearer focus, the Youth Parliament can play a much greater role than it has done to date.
Peter Dunne is one of The Detail's regular political commentators and a former Member of Parliament. Like most MPs, Peter has taken several young aspiring politicians under his wing.
I always was quite particular to get people who I thought would be effective local reps. We tried to work on local projects of engagement with local schools, etc., and some were more successful than others. In one instance, we worked pretty closely with the City Council because it had a sort of a youth council at that point.
But that kind of mentorship isn't guaranteed. There's no actual standard around how an MP chooses their young wannabe politician, or how much time they actually have to spend with them. We'll get more into that later. First, let's go over the basics. Youth Parliament is an event held every 3 years where MPs get to select a 16 to 18-year-old to represent them in Parliament.
So for a couple of days, they come together at Parliament, they have sessions in the House, they have question time, they have debates, they have mock select committees on a particular fictional piece of legislation. And it's really about giving the youth MPs an experience of what Parliament is like, how it works and how they get their point across. Initially, it was just this 2-day event once every 3 years. The issue in the last probably 10 years or so has been how can the youth MPs play a wider role than just those 2 or 3 days a year? And a number of them have undertaken community functions with their proper MP or have been involved in local organisations, etc. So it's evolved a little bit beyond its original concept, but I'm not quite sure that it's settled yet in terms of a sort of a clear format for the future. But I think the question still remains is, so what do the youth MPs actually do outside the parliamentary experience? And more importantly, what weight is attached to that? They've got no formal status in the community, so what role can they play?
Yeah, right. I mean, I guess I'm going to kind of try and flip that question back on you, because aside from, in July when they actually go to the Beehive and they're sitting there having question time and debates, what do they do, in April, May, June and August?
Well, this is where it gets a little murky because a lot of that comes down to the initiative of the MP who they are sponsored by. In some cases, they probably won't do very much. In some cases, the MP will work actively with them and assign them a particular project, say, involving getting hold of local groups of young people in the electorate to find out what they might think on issues or to pursue a particular cause, etc. But it's all very much over to what the relationship between the youth MP and the local MP is. Some MPs were very good and took particular care of their youth MPs. Others sort of selected someone to do the job, and that was it. They left them to it. And that's another issue too. There's no uniform method for selecting a youth MP. What happens is when the vacancy arises, it's over to the MP to go out and recruit. I recall one year putting out a mock media statement saying that I was seeking a replacement MP in my electorate, which the media interpreted as a sign that I was about to stand down. But unfortunate. But then once you've got people expressing interest, the method for selection varies. Some MPs go through a rigorous process where they have an external panel that interviews the candidates and recommends one. Others have a much more informal selection process. I always used to require the candidates to write an essay on a topic that I would give them, and then I would interview them based on that topic. And the topic was usually around what they would do in the role and how they saw their function, etc. And then I'd make a selection based on both how they presented, because after all, presentation is an important part of politics, and also the substance of their ideas. In some cases, I suspect they just appoint the kids of a mate, because, as I say, there's no automatic process. There's not an election process or anything like that. It's over to the MP themselves.
Youth Parliament, is it an opportunity for MPs to go out and influence and, I guess, train the next generation of politicians for their respective parties?
It should be, and in some cases it is. Others, I think, treat it a little bit more, not flippantly, but just lackadaisically. But it should be an opportunity to recruit the next generation of politicians. I've always been a little bit wary of doing that on a partisan basis, because I think you're not really asking the Youth MP to represent you politically. They represent your electorate, or represent you if you're a list MP. But I think it is about getting people interested in politics as a potential career opportunity, seeing for them how the system works and how they can influence it. I think the problem that's arisen in recent times has been that some of the youth MPs have seen themselves more as there to be spokespeople for a cause rather than to be, if you like, politicians in training.
In previous years, Youth Parliament has given us rangatahi a platform to talk about the issues that we care about the most. And rangatahi this year are being silenced and we are being censored.
The Ministry of Youth Development emailed Youth MPs with a subject line of changes required, complete with edits they wanted us to make or had already made to our speech.
In any functioning democracy, critique is not only allowed, it is essential.
Is there a danger that they're going to become overly vocal and, without sounding, I guess, like I'm trying to knock them down, but that they feel like they're more important than they actually are?
I think there is a risk of that, and I think we saw some elements of that in the controversy around speeches for this year's Youth Parliament. Having said that, I think it was a crass, overly heavy-handed response to try and tell youth MPs what they should or should not say. I think that was a bit dumb and stupid on the part of the organisers. But I can understand why, because, as I say, some of the youth MPs seem to be more interested in making their point in a parliamentary debate than actually participating in the process as a whole. And if we're talking about training the next generation of leaders as to how the political process works, the good and the bad, the grind and the sort of the glamour, then they've got to take an overarching approach rather than just get up there and sort of parade their cause in the debating chamber.
So do you think perhaps instead of having, those couple of days where they're just in the House debating, it becomes more of a mentorship program where they're actually taught the ins and outs of what it takes to be an MP, and it's a bit more theoretical rather than practical?
I think there's something in that, and I think that brings you back to an earlier consideration. What is the role of the Youth Parliament? If it's to provide just a forum every 3 years for that particular group of people to get up and state their views, then probably you could pare it back considerably from what it is and just make it a couple of days only. But if it's to be a bit more substantial, it's a bit like a sort of a form of civics education, then I think you do need to think about not just a wider role, but how these people are chosen, so they get a real understanding of how the process works, and just a realisation that it's not just sort of swanning up to Parliament and having your say and then disappearing again. There's a lot of hard work on legislation, on dealing with constituents, local issues, all those sorts of things that goes alongside it. If the position could be refocused that way, it would have some merit. But bear in mind too that there are other opportunities that occur. I was involved for some years with the Commonwealth Institute that used to put on an annual Commonwealth Day at Parliament where delegates would be chosen from schools and they'd come along representing particular countries. So there'd be a Prime Minister, a Foreign Minister, they'd have their own Secretary General, and they would be given a Commonwealth political problem to resolve and have to work their way through that problem and then present their collective conclusions at the end of it. So that focused them quite firmly on what the role and the purpose was, taught them things like the skills of negotiation, how you listen to other people, how you influence them in terms of getting your point across, etc. So those sorts of mechanisms, I think, are really important, and I think they're things that are being a little bit lost when the Youth Parliament sort of just gets carried away by side issues.
Officially, Youth Parliament is described as, quote, a unique opportunity for young New Zealanders to learn firsthand about our democracy, influence government decision-making and have their voices heard. Peter says, broadly speaking, that's true.
It depends on the topic that they're discussing. I can think of occasions in the past where the mock bill that they've been discussing has been one that's been very relevant to young people. I remember one, for instance, being about the drinking age. I remember other times when there have been discussions, I think, about youth mental health. So in those sorts of issues where the topic is very relevant to the contemporary needs of young people, I think that their voices are heard, their influence is felt, because often they can bring a perspective that other MPs can't bring. But if the topic is a little bit more esoteric or a wee bit more theoretical, or even just sort of not something that's of immediate concern, then it really just becomes a talk shop. Their voices don't count for that much.
And how does sitting in a chamber debating about, like you say, at times hypothetical situations and legislation, help youth learn about democracy?
Well, I don't think that particular bit does. Parliamentary chamber is just the theatre. That's where things are acted out. If that's all they do, then they won't get any great sense of how our democracy works. But they do sit in mock select committees where they've got the chance to question officials and tease out a particular issue. They also have a question time where they have real ministers fronting up. They're more likely to give them an insight into how the process works than just the theatre of getting up and giving their 5-minute speech in the chamber.
Some youth parliamentarians are claiming government censorship after suggested changes to their speeches. All youth MPs get a 3-minute speech, but some say that the speeches were edited to remove references to pay equity in the Treaty of Waitangi Principles Bill and so on.
If you're talking about a democracy where free speech is paramount, you don't tell MPs, be they youth MPs or real MPs, what they should be saying. That just seems to me to be completely contrary to the idea of free speech. I think probably the point that was trying to be made, rather ineptly, was you're there to represent some views. You're not there to sort of campaign and harangue on your own behalf. And just sort of remember that and be careful about how you phrase what you're going to say, which is quite reasonable. But the way it came across, I thought, was very heavy-handed, and I think was perhaps inexperience on both the part of the people giving the advice and some of those who were supposed to be receiving it.
Peter Dunne thinks it's good that Youth Parliament is so high profile, but adds that if there's going to be media coverage, there needs to be clarity around the purpose of the event.
It's not just a sort of a ragtag collection of young people coming together for a couple of days to play at being MPs. If we're going to give it the status I think it deserves, then we've got to ensure that the role of Youth MP has some substance and meaning to it.
Newsroom received several emails, both from Youth MPs and members of the Youth Parliament Press Gallery, expressing their frustration over how the censorship allegation dominated news coverage. 19-year-old Oscar Duffy was one of those who wrote in. He's the Youth MP representing National's Melissa Lee.
It's kind of disappointing because it takes away from the real issues that we brought up and the real good stuff that we actually did.
At the moment, Oscar is working on scholarship papers that will hopefully get him playing football in the States. But becoming a politician is something he's considering for his future. He says diversity of experience and thought in Parliament is important.
And I think I could probably bring something a little bit different. A lot of people are there, like year 13's like, well, what are you doing next year? Law and politics, you know. Well, there's a lot of people doing law and politics, right? And that's not me. You know, my whole thing is football. Like I'm a athlete. Like I've lived that kind of experience. That's probably helped me mature pretty quickly, being chucked into senior football at an earlier age. Yeah, I think I can bring a different experience. You know, I've got a Māori side of my family and my dad's Irish. We've got a Pākehā side as well. And it's just a really not so much unique, but different experience to what a lot of people have. I kind of took up an interest in politics, I guess, this time last year while my nan was in hospital. So she's a Māori lady and she didn't have the best experience in our healthcare. So that was a pretty key driver in me being interested in what's going on. And obviously there's so much tension between Māori and the Crown relations, as people call it. And that affects my family really directly. And so, you know, it was something that I became passionate about really quickly. Saw all the things that were wrong and the things that I'd like to change.
And so that's how you became interested in politics.
Yeah.
How did you learn about Youth Parliament and decide, yeah, this is something I really want to do?
Well, while I was figuring out what to do for the year, up until, I guess, August when I'm supposed to leave, or January if I leave then, I was just looking at internships and things I could do for the year. And, you know, I searched up politics internships, young people, and it came up online, and so I applied through Melissa's email. I sent her a 300-word essay about what it was important to me and, you know, what I wanted to do, and she emailed me back saying, hey, let's have an interview, and I went and did that at her office after a game. I was late because our game finished late, but I turned up and we had about a 45-minute chat. It was really nice. We spoke really freely, and she called a couple of days later saying, yeah, we'd love to have you. So here I am, I guess. Yeah.
It's interesting because when I contacted you and I suggested interview times, I assumed you were in school, but you're actually 19.
Yeah.
How does that work? Because I thought the criteria was 16 to 18.
Yeah, so because it's like triannual, there's like a 3-year age range. So you have to be 16 to 18 on the 1st of February when it opens. So it just keeps it the same every 3 years. So every age bracket gets a go at it, if that makes sense.
So you were just on the
I was
cusp,
on the very older end of the people there. Lots of high school kids, year 13s and 12s, but there was also a few uni students there as well. Happened to be the people I guess I got along best with just because same age, similar experience.
Yeah, tell me about that. When you come there, you're seeing people from different ages, different backgrounds, different parts of New Zealand. What's that like?
It's so interesting. Youth Parliament was the first event I've done like that ever. It was a complete culture shock because most of my high school experience was football camps. And so people there had done things like, NZ Model UN and stuff. And so they're really familiar with, I guess, being in a suit and doing that kind of stuff, and it was really new to me. I think the most eye-opening thing about meeting all these new people was the incredibly different lived experiences everybody has. Hearing people in the house doing all their speeches about what's important to them in their communities, such diverse issues. I guess it highlights how important it is to have diversity and a range of viewpoints and ideas, right? I've been in quite a bubble in central Auckland, I guess, and doing high school and living here all my life, and playing football, I haven't really seen much different. So that's definitely one of the things I took out of it.
So what does a youth MP think the purpose of Youth Parliament is?
It's about giving youth an insight into politics, obviously. I think it's everyone that's there has a keen interest in politics and advocacy and change making. And I think it's about giving youth a stage to air their voice and their concerns. It's a non-partisan thing. It's more about representing your electorate. And so all the issues that people brought to the table were things that were real concerns with their peers. Yeah, I think it's, about that, right? Giving youth a voice and giving them an insight and a taste of what it was. And I think we got a pretty good taste of what ugly politics gets like pretty quickly. Yeah.
Go into that a little bit. What do you mean by that?
There was a speech about race-based scholarships and stuff, and people got up and left, and not that I agree with that, but I can see why you want to get up and leave. Then there was the press conferences that you probably saw a little bit of about censorship and no censorship.
Oscar didn't do a speech, so he wasn't directly impacted by any allegations of censorship, but he thinks it's a shame it was the only thing covered by the media.
I'm not going to take away from people that said they were censored. If that's what they believe, then that's what they believe. They're all smart people, and they all were articulate about what happened to them or what didn't happen to them, so that's up to them. But I just think the disappointing part about it is that was all that was really reported on, and it took away from the good stuff that we actually did.
Right. Yeah, so tell me about some of that good stuff.
Some of the speeches, my mate Paddy did a really good speech on carbon credits, really targeted issue that's really affects his people and the people in his area. So that's, I guess, cool to see all those local issues. A couple of people did speeches on carbon credits, some about tradies, some about, our Māori environment, things like that. But the best part, I guess, about the targeted work was the parliamentary working groups, which was a new inclusion this year. And essentially there was 12 or 13 groups, and we all focused on really specific issues. So I was the co-chair of our group, focused on sport and rec, which was, our question was, how can the ministry or Sport New Zealand use sport to better improve the lives of young people? And that was really cool. We got to sit in a select committee room. We talked about real, issues that people face around sport, like inaccessibility due to cost and transport, and, gender and ethnic differences, like lived experiences within sport, and how we can make it more accessible for people. And then on the Wednesday, we presented to the policy lead at Sport New Zealand, a rep from Minister Mitchell's office, and we presented some solutions like, offering a charity grant to low-income families so they can fund a year of fees for sport or something. And then we talked about using sport as a way to reduce youth crime and things like that. So it was really cool to see that. There was subcommittees about online safety, biodiversity credits, I think it's called. Just a lot of really cool targeted stuff that was really impressive, and really cool to see how we all work together to find real solutions for that kind of thing.
Do you think you have an influence on the government?
I hope so. I do. I think we've got to feedback loop call with Sport New Zealand and the ministry in a few days, I think. So I'll be really interested to see what they took out of what we presented to them. I think it came down to how much work we did and how much input we gave them was what would come out of it on the other side, I guess. I mean, if we came to them with useless solutions, then they'd probably give us useless outcomes, right? There'd probably be no influence there. But I think we did really good work in terms of making attainable solutions to change things. But on a realistic note, probably not much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A bit of a tough question for you.
Yeah, go on.
Do you think that people who take part in this youth parliament think that they are more important than they actually are?
Yeah. Yeah. That's so funny. That was one of the things we spoke about a little bit with some of my friends from down there. Yes, is my short answer.
Yeah?
Yeah, yes.
Why?
I think there's just a lot of politically charged people in one room, and, putting them all in the same room is great, and it gets everyone, talking to each other and, firing off really good initiatives, and they all do really impressive things. But yeah, I guess some of them do think they're a bit more important than they are, which is a shame because they probably should be more important and have more of a say.
Oscar would like to see their time in Parliament lengthened.
We crammed a lot of stuff in. Like with question time, there was no supplementaries, which is not reflective of real question time. But I definitely think there is an opportunity for people to learn more about what it takes to be an MP and a politician. I think I was really lucky having Melissa. She was super invested in me, and I went to a lot of her events, like community outreach things, and we did a lot of work together. We did things in her office. I spent a bit of time with Eric, her assistant, in the office, and then I actually ended up running my own, volunteer recognition event with the 3 schools in my electorate as part of National Volunteer Week. But a lot of people, for instance, who had ministers as a MP, they have no time, right? Ministers are so busy and stuff. So I roomed with Simeon Brown's Youth MP, and he didn't really see Simeon a lot, or if at all, right? And so it's a different thing. But I think I learned a lot, but I think there's definitely a lot of room for other people to learn, and I think that's probably, something that can be solved by more collective experience.
So this has been running for 30 years now.
Yeah.
It started in 1995.
I know.
If you could make changes to how it's run, what would you change?
It's a tough one, right? Because what I'd change is probably make the age bracket a little bit older. I think being freshly 16 is probably too young, to be honest. And I know it's about amplifying youth voice and stuff, but maybe even just move it up 1 year, 17 to 19. So there's more first-year uni students who've been through high school, who've seen the whole system, right? Because I was pretty in a minority group. In the last 6 months that I've been outside of high school, I think I've matured so much more than I did any whole year in high school, right? And so I think there's opportunity there for there to be more real change and, even for people to listen a bit better, right?
Has it made you want to pursue a career in politics?
Yeah, big time, big time.
That's all for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. Thank you to Peter Dunne and Oscar Duffy. This episode was produced by Alexia Russell and engineered by William Saunders. I'm Davina Zimmer. Ka kite.